John Drives Anything off-road recovery with my dad's awesome Colorado ZR2. Pretty bad. 12 miles into the desert, and then this stopped me in my tracks. This section right here. This is what you get when you Google search sway bar purpose. Sway bars help your ride handle turns and prevent body lean, the last thing you want while operating a motor coach or RV. So you probably don't want to remove the sway bar on an 8,500 pound vehicle, and that's why a sway bar is recommended. And here's something to think about too, and this is the main reason why I want to re-add a sway bar to my van. What if you get into an accident? If the person you get into an accident with has a really good lawyer and they notice you don't have a sway bar on your van, they could contest that. So something to really think about when removing a sway bar. The only people who should be removing a sway bar is people who like to jump their vans. And I've seen exactly one guy jump their vans like a trophy truck. So think about that. You don't want to get into an accident removing your sway bar. You know, the other person has a really good lawyer. You could run into a little trouble.
Oh my God.
Oh, he ripped up that.
Yeah, I know.
Here we go, watch this. V10. Easy money.
Oh my gosh.
There's my microwave.
I know. Did you break something with that?
Nah, I bounce it around all the time. Here's another thing to consider when thinking about sway bars. Let's take a look at a sports car, 97 to 04 Corvette. There's sway bar upgrades. Why sway bar upgrades? So your sports car handles better. I think that's Slick Rick. I'm gonna text him and tell him, hey, I saw you at Walmart, Slick Rick. It's Slick Rick. You guys are all about the lift kits, right? So let's talk about it real quick. Action van suspension, Well-Tec, same size tires too. And the Action van is slightly taller than the Well-Tec. So $5,200 installed, $3,500 installed. If you go base kit and you want to install it yourself, $2,089. And this one's $3,200. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. The fact that the Action van suspension lifted vans sits taller than my Well-Tec bothers me just a little bit, because the lift kit is mostly about looking cool, and I paid a lot more for the Well-Tec. And this right here is a big source to why the Action van suspension sits taller. These are Skyjacker 186s. So let's take a look at what the 186 is made for. The Skyjackers that Well-Tec uses is made for Ford Broncos. There it is, Skyjacker 186. So eventually I'm going to need new shocks. So when I get my shocks changed out eventually, since this kit has been in my van for 3 years now, I'm going with the Action van lift coils. They use their own design, and when you compare the Action van to the Well-Tec lift coils, the Action vans are more robust. People have reported that their Well-Tec lift kits start sagging up front after a couple of years, especially on the diesel vans. Diesel engines weigh a couple 100 pounds more than the gas engines. So there you go, 186 coils, Skyjackers, made for Ford Broncos. 1996 Ford Bronco curb weight, 4,587 pounds. My van's a E350 curb weight, 5388 to 64. So the Econoline's at least 1,000 pounds more than the Ford Bronco. So these coils are designed for a vehicle that weighs 1,000 to 2,000 pounds less than the vans. Sitting at 6560. What? This is why you want to lift your Econoline. You look awesome, even next to a F650. Like most people, I opt for the rear lift blocks. The rear springs are really expensive. Here's the hole that defeated my van. So the line I should have took was straight here. That caught me. The Weltec rear leaf springs adds $1,500 to the price. If you have them install it, it's an additional $900 for labor. So a good amount more, and that's why most people opt for the rear lift block. Action Van Suspension's website looks like it's straight out of 1999. They sell rear leaf springs, but they don't advertise it. Most likely, I'm just going to do an add-a-leaf. I'm pretty sure rear leaf springs cost a good amount of coin no matter where you go. I know off-road shops will custom make rear leaf springs if you want to use rear leaf springs instead of lift blocks. I'm running wide body fenders on my van, and these wide body fenders made the wheel gap 2 inches taller, so now you can't really tell. But when I first measured out my van, when I got it lifted, the front was sitting 2 inches higher than the back, so the back is sagging a good amount more than the front, and that's why I want to do an add-a-leaf. So it's an E350, so I got 4 leaf springs in there, but I want to do an add-a-leaf to get more lift in the back. I would tell him not to. It might be too long. Oh, easy.
Alright.
I make easy work of that.
I think you're good.
You're gonna do it too.
That's what I thought. A little scrape right there.
A little scrape. I have an extended van, so of course the departure angle is horrible compared to the normal length vans. The normal length vans end right here. The extendeds go all the way out here. So when you look at the departure angle of a standard length van, it's actually really nice. So I'm gonna need all the lift I could get in the back. That's why I eventually want to do an add-a-leaf. I have an aux locker, selectable locker, and of course I got the proper 410 gears for this van.
The little pigs. You see the little... And then we saw the little markers.
Yeah. Stock gearing on this van is a 373. So when I put the 285, 75, 16 tires, my gears became a 340, which is a horrible gear. So I got 410s. Now my gearing's a 381. So I actually can put 1 inch bigger of a tire for just a tiny bit more clearance. So that's a 285, 75, 17 tire. So I eventually want to go with that size tire, and I'll actually be at a 373 gear right back at stock. With the 285, 75, 16s and a 410, I'm at a 381. So a little lower gearing than stock. So I have room for a slightly bigger tire. I still need to put this in. Front mount tow hitch. So once I put this in, I have these hooks right here, these loops, for another recovery point. So this steel bumper right here, it's actually really strong. If you wrap a recovery strap around this bumper right in the middle, you could pull the van from the middle of the bumper, but I still want to put a front mount tow hitch. I'm not a fan of how Weltec removes the front sway bar, so that's another thing I want to address eventually. Take this down to action van suspension and get a sway bar added to this, just for safety. Not saying that this van feels unsafe, but when you're shaped like a brick and your van's lifted, you want more stability and not less stability. This is what you get when you Google search sway bar purpose. Sway bars help your ride handle turns and prevent body lean, the last thing you want while operating a motor coach or RV. This is the lift kit I'm running in my van. I've been running it for 3 years now. The 5-inch Baja grocery getter. This is Weltec's cheapest 5-inch lift kit. So rear lift block on this one and sway bar delete. So when you look at the lift kit options, there's no option for a sway bar. But then when you look at their Class B RV lift kit, nearly $5,000, but it does include the rear springs. But this is what I want to share with you guys right here. So we highly suggest adding the sway bar upgrade to the Class B kit. So $700 extra if you want to add the Class B sway bar. And that's why when I get the funds, I really want to add a sway bar to my van. I'm going to go to action van suspension, because when you look at both of their lift kits, they don't delete the sway bar. So this is my theory. So my van checks in at about 6,500 pounds. And when you look at a Class B, they check in at about 8,500 pounds. So you probably don't want to remove the sway bar on an 8,500 pound vehicle, and that's why a sway bar is recommended. And here's something to think about too, and this is the main reason why I want to re-add a sway bar to my van. What if you get into an accident? If the person you get into an accident with has a really good lawyer and they notice you don't have a sway bar on your van, they could contest that. So something to really think about when removing a sway bar. The only people who should be removing a sway bar is people who like to jump their vans, and I've seen exactly one guy jump their vans like a trophy truck. So think about that. You don't want to get into an accident removing your sway bar. You know, other person has a really good lawyer, you could run into a little trouble. That's the main reason I want to add a sway bar to my van. Like I said, I'm not saying the van drives horribly without a sway bar. I just noticed a little more wandering when it's a really windy day. The van doesn't feel unsafe without a sway bar, but you know, you want every little safety aid that you could get on a vehicle that's lifted, that's shaped like a brick. And here's something to think about. Here's another thing to consider when thinking about sway bars. Let's take a look at a sports car, 97 to 04 Corvette. Their sway bar upgrades. Why sway bar upgrades? So your sports car handles better. So that's what I showed you guys earlier. What's a sway bar for? To reduce body roll and improve the control of your vehicle. A little lift kit talk today. Something to think about, especially to people wanting to get a lift kit for their van. I've had this Weltec lift kit for a little over 3 years now. 30,000 plus miles. These Fox shocks are the shocks that this lift kit came with, so eventually I'm going to have to get these shocks replaced. And when I do that, maybe I'll try out the King shocks. So I'll take this van to action van suspension, get the action van coils instead, and maybe some King shocks. Or maybe I'll get some Bilsteins, because it's been a long time since I've had Bilsteins. My first lifted van had Bilsteins, so maybe I'll try it out just for video purposes. So yeah, definitely want the action van coils, because it bothers me that Slick Rick's van sits taller than mine. We have the same size tires, similar weight. Our builds are nothing crazy, just basic stuff in our vans, and yeah, his van sits taller than mine and it bothers me. Running the standard rear lift block that this 5-inch lift kit comes with, I do want rear springs, but I have no idea how much Action Van charges. Well-Tech charges $1,500 plus $900 for labor. That's a lot of money. So maybe I'll find out what Action Van charges. If it's a little more affordable, I might go with back rear springs instead of a lift block. But if it's still pricey, I definitely want to at least do an add-a-leaf to raise the back of my van just a little bit, because in that initial video I shared with you guys, I got hung up all over this area right here. So 2-inch lift here, slightly bigger tires, maybe get the back lifted about 3 inches. That'll go a long way, man. Every inch counts. And that's why I said it bothers me just a little bit that Slick Rick's van sits taller than mine. So if I could get an extra inch out of the front, that'll help also. We both have wide body fenders. He's running the Action Van. I have a Well-Tech. There's the mirrors. What's the eye test telling you guys? Which one's sitting taller? Well-Tech, Action Van, Well-Tech.